Welcome back, and always a delight to have with us Mark Meckler. Mark is just a special friend and really on top of everything. He's one of the, I call a frontline warrior. He's a political pundit, he's an attorney, a business executive. He's the president and the co-founder of the Convention of States, which is the largest nationwide movement seeking to call for a first ever Article 5 Convention of States. By all of that is wrapped up in a little booklet that he provides, and you can get those by going to conventionofstates.com, and there's the picture of the website, conventionofstates.com, and you can check that out there. Mark, good to see you, buddy. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to be with you.
Good. Where's your sidekick Trigger? I don't see him walking around back there.
Well, I got a couple of very large dogs that could almost fit the saddles, and they're sitting right behind me.
Good. Well, a lot to talk to you about. What do you think about this Middle East trip and all the stuff that's going on in the last 48 hours?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know how it all shakes out, but what I love about it is that President Trump continues to be a disruptor. He does the things people say he shouldn't do. He accomplishes things that people say he can't do. And he mixes it up in a way that no American president ever has. I think what he does is he's using his talents as a business executive, as a real estate developer, not as a politician or a bureaucrat or a diplomat. He goes out there and he mixes it up with these folks. He creates what a lot of people around him call strategic uncertainty. And so far, the results from that have been quite good.
All right, so he seems to be leading with business deals in the Middle East in order just to create friendship and relationship. It seems to be working. There's a couple questions. Syria and Qatar. What do you think about that?
Okay, I mean, I'll start at a baseline that I don't like the Syrian leadership and I don't like the Qatari leadership. The Qataris are about as two-faced as a country could possibly be. They play a power broker in the Middle East. They are the prime funders for Hamas. So they've been in the middle of terrorism for a very long time. But we also have a base in Qatar. So it's very messy. I do think it's important for the president to be there and try and figure out all of this stuff on his own. In Syria, we have a problem because you have radical Islamists that have now taken over the country. They are backed by Erdogan, the radical Islamist leader of Turkey. So what happens there is difficult to say, but I do think Trump, what he's attempting to do is bring them into the correct orbit and perhaps into the Abraham Accords. I think that's the ultimate goal.
Okay. In the meantime, there's a common verbiage that at the end of the day, Iran is not allowed to have a nuke. I don't care who he's talking to, what country, that's a repeated theme. That tells me that as he walks around, especially with Saudi Arabia and others that might come into the accord, that something is brewing to take out the nukes in Iran. And I'm not a warmonger, but it just feels like that's on the table.
I really think, from my perspective, that's the only choice. Anything short of that is essentially going to be a repeat of the Obama deal with the Iranians, the JCPOA, that allowed them to keep their nuclear program, allowed them to continue enriching uranium for quote-unquote civilian purposes. That's ridiculous. This is one of the most oil-rich places on the face of the earth. They don't need uranium for civilian purposes. They don't need a nuclear program. I hope that that's the red line. I worry about whether it will be. I'll be frank, Steve Witkoff as a negotiator in the Middle East, I don't trust him. He's taken a lot of money from Arab countries. I think he's a little too cozy with the Arab countries. So we'll have to see what happens. I hope they hold that red line. And it's not just, by the way, on getting nukes. It should be on dismantling the entire nuclear program in Iran. I think it's going to take military action to get that done.
So do you think, with all this going on, obviously Iran's buying time with all this and taking advantage of that. At what point does Israel say, sorry, Mr. President, we're out of time?
Yeah, I think they're going to do it at the time and place of their choosing. And one of the things that I think Trump is trying to do is he's trying to say that he won't necessarily be involved in that, and that's going to be up to Israel. I think I heard him recently say Israel has to look out for Israel's interests. So that seems like permission to me. I don't see any other way. The Iranians are not going to voluntarily give up their nuclear program. And I want to caution folks, people see this as sort of black and white, either or. In other words, either you don't take out the Iranian nuclear program, or you have all-out war. You take it out, you drop a few bombs on their nuclear sites, and you have an all-out war. I don't believe that's the case. I believe that the Iranian nuclear program would be destroyed. That would not cause a broader war. It would weaken Iran substantially. It might lead to a more positive regime change in Iran, but I don't believe the choice is between taking out their nuclear facilities and war.
Okay. All right, so let me come back home with some things here. As we watch, and I don't say this with glee, it's just obvious observation, and that is we're watching a political party unravel in front of our eyes and auger into the ground, maybe not recovering. And yet, as they go down, I'm talking about the Democrats, they are exposing something that they've been involved in their sneaky plan for a lot of years. This really opens up the door to one of your passions, and that is term limits. What's the feel?
Yeah, look, I agree with what you're saying about the Democrats. I'm actually stunned. They're saying the quiet part out loud now. I mean, essentially, they're opposed to everything that's good and just and right. And I'm not talking about my standards. I'm talking on 80-20 issues where 80% of the American people agree there should be term limits, there should be a balanced budget. We should secure our borders. We should send illegal immigrants home. The Democrats are against all those things to the extent they've even got to the point where they're now assaulting ICE agents in New Jersey. I'm talking about congressional Democrats. I think some of them are going to be charged and arrested. And so I think that the appetite right now, more than ever, is in favor of term limits, of that these people got to go. They've been there too long. And by the way, I want to be fair. I'm an equal sort of opportunity insulter of Congress. The same is true for the Republicans. I saw a post from the Republican House caucus yesterday saying that it's time for the Republicans in the public to get off the sidelines. I don't know who these people are talking to, but they're not talking to anybody I know. We've been off the sidelines for a long time. You've been off the sidelines. The public actually gave them the House and the Senate and the presidency. It seems like that it's the Republicans in Congress that are sitting a little too much on the sidelines.
Okay, couple things here. Do you see the Republican base expanding in the House and the Senate in 26?
I mean, I think if Republicans play their cards correctly, absolutely. But I don't have a lot of faith in Republicans' ability to do that. You know, Republican Party is notoriously good at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They need to get some stuff done. They need to take some strong positions. And it seems like only a few in the caucus are willing to do that. I understand they're in a tenuous position because they have such a slim majority. So there's only so much they can get done. But it also seems like they're not taking strong positions. And we have Republicans peeling away from their own base, as I said with that quote I just gave you about they're actually blaming the Republican electorate. So I worry about it. I think that their advantage, their structural advantage, is that Democrats are so completely out of touch with the American people. So if Republicans just stick to the common sense, not extreme talking points, if they talk about reforming government, tax cuts, regulation cuts, securing the border, removing illegal immigrants from the country, if they stick with those things and just play that card, the straight ahead common sense card, I think they do have an opportunity to increase their majority in Congress.
So both parties seem to be suffering from the same disease, and that is they have the radical left and the radical right. I can tell you as a former chairman, this is a serious problem. You know, I mean, both parties are not unified, and you kind of wonder at the end, does the rhino win or is that radical right win?
Yeah, I see this not only at the level of the federal government, where Mike Johnson has a terrible problem holding his caucus together, but I see it in states all over the country where you have people, and I want to be really cautious how I throw about terms. I consider myself very far right, but I go into some of these caucuses and I talk to some of these Republicans in the states, and they're not willing to take an 80% victory on anything. It's 100% or nothing, and anybody who is in the 20% on any issue becomes a rhino. That's not a strategy for long-term victory. And the way you win is by building coalitions, by building across sort of ideological divides within the party. You build a big tent, as Reagan said, and has been said for so long. And I think we have folks on the fringe, on the outside of both parties, that aren't doing that, and it's damaging both parties' opportunity to lead.
Well, you said that so well, Mark. That's spot on. I don't know where the resolve is, but I think sometimes we Republicans circle the wagons and shoot inward, and we've got to be careful about that because this next election is as critical as the past one.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you know, I see some great leadership out there, you know, being very specific in Texas. There's a rep by the name of Cody Vasut, and he's as conservative as anybody in the caucus, but he's not running around yelling that everybody who disagrees with him is a rhino, and he manages to cross the lines. I actually think Mike Johnson's doing a very good job, the best that could possibly be done in Congress of doing that. So the leadership does exist out there, principled leaders, but leaders who understand political reality. Politics is about the art of the possible. It's not just about taking a position for clicks and views on the internet.
Recently, Speaker Johnson and Vice President Vance kind of gave a thumbs up for the Convention of States. Is it believable, and does it help?
Yeah, look, I think we've been really blessed. I can't take any credit for this whatsoever. I mean, God has blessed us in the sense that if you look at the administration right now, the people in the administration supporting Convention of States, it's astounding. There's like an entire scaffolding inside the admin. JD Vance is a supporter. Caroline Leavitt is a supporter. Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins, SecDef Pete Hegseth, Mike Huckabee. So they're just spread throughout the very high levels of the federal government. Of course, in Congress, you have Mike Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House. We didn't plan for any of this. It's just, 11 years of hard work, getting supporters who rise up through the levels of government. So I do think it helps our position. I was actually in Washington, D.C., meeting with a bunch of folks last week. And I think there is an appetite growing within Washington, D.C. for those who want permanent reform to move forward with the call for a convention of states.
All right. So in this next election, I remember this by experience, and that is having candidates in the 2026 midterm sign a declaration of term limits.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Term limits alone is very popular among the American public. The problem with it is if you have term limits on Congress, but not term limits on bureaucrats and staffers, what we get is a much worse, much more entrenched, and much more powerful deep state. All of those people will be more powerful if you turn Congress and don't turn them. So there is an effort to impose just term limits on Congress. It hasn't passed near as many states as we have. I think they're at 4 or 5 states versus our 19, almost 20. The problem is, again, we do that, we're going to empower the deep state. Things are going to be much worse than ever. The Convention of States effort allows us to put term limits on staffers, bureaucrats, and the judiciary as well. And I think if we're going to do term limits, those things are mandatory so that we don't make the problem worse.
Oh, that's well said. All right, let me take a quick break. By the way, Mark has a wonderful booklet on this, and he'll send them out by the dozens to you. You can go to conventionofstates.com and order the little booklet. And there's a picture of the landing page, and get some sent to you. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. Always an honor to have with us Mark Meckler. He's a political analysis attorney and business executive. He's also the president and the co-founder of the Convention of States. He does have a website where you can go to conventionofstates.com and order up a bunch of the booklets called the Article 5 Convention States right there. All right, back to Mark. By the way, Mark, I have to tell you this, the last segment we did, you were being preempted by Trigger in the back, sitting on his back on all 4 in the legs.
He does that from time to time.
Dog lover, I get it. Good stuff. All right, I want to come back to, it seems like the president slowly but surely is winning some of these nonsensical district court battles. What's your take?
This is a very interesting fight. The district courts don't have the authority granted to them by statute, by the Supreme Court. I mean, there's no way, not by Congress, to do the things they've been doing. And so I think this is an important political fight, legal fight, balancing between the branches that actually has to take place in America. I don't know where it's going to come out exactly. Ultimately, the Supreme Court is going to rule on these nationwide injunctions. I think they're a major problem for the United States. I would rather see it not resolved by the Supreme Court. I think it should be resolved by Congress. Congress should decide what authority the courts are supposed to have. That is their job. They created the courts. They define the scope of authority of the courts. And there are ways to fix the problem that are creative. In other words, you could say that it takes 3 or 4 or 5 district courts to issue a nationwide injunction together. You can't just get one judge in one liberal district or one conservative district to issue that. It requires more consensus than that. there needs to be a fix. I'm not convinced the Supreme Court is the right place for that.
Okay, so to unpack that a little bit more, from what I understand, the Congress does have the authority to look at the jurisdiction of the courts and the authority of the court. But the measure of the case itself could get appealed to the Supreme Court. In other words, the specifics of the case could go to the Supreme Court, but the authority and the district jurisdiction of the court can be regulated by Congress. Right?
Yeah, both of those things are correct. Yeah, and to add a little bit of nuance, I mean, the Supreme Court can fill in if Congress doesn't. The Supreme Court has authority over the district courts and can set or limit their jurisdiction to some extent. And so that's what I'm saying. The Supreme Court could step in, could say, "Hey, we've never given authority. Congress has never given authority for this, so you don't have authority to do these nationwide injunctions." But I think more nuance would be found in a congressional approach. And that would be my preference.
Well, it would be codified more solidly if it went through Congress than going to a court that eventually could get overturned.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think it's a more solid way to do it. And it's really the constitutional way to do it. This is what the framers intended. The odd part is that the framers didn't intend much about the courts. They didn't have a lot of experience with the federal court system. The Constitution creates only a Supreme Court, such other courts as Congress shall decide. So there really wasn't much of a framework then. We've sort of made it up as we went along. This is a problem that's arisen that's going to have to be dealt with. I actually think the best method is in Congress, but right now it doesn't look like Congress is going to do much of anything about it.
Okay. In the meantime, the president continues to win these things. Let me ask you this. Everybody's arguing, I say everybody, the left is arguing that these people aren't given, the deportees are not given due process. And they quote the article that says all peoples. And that has to be defined. Is it your opinion that all peoples is all peoples, or is it all citizens of the United States?
Yeah, I would kind of go with the broader definition and say all peoples. I think the question is, what is due process? And if you look at the words, due process is the process that is due under the circumstances. And that's supposed to take into account the totality of all circumstances. I'll give you a very specific example. I've seen it calculated that with 20 million illegal immigrants in the country, if we were to do a 5-minute hearing for each of those illegal immigrants, you would look at over 200 years to do hearings for each of those illegal immigrants. Obviously, that's not possible, plain and simple. So that cannot be the process that's due. And so it is up to governments to decide, our federal government to decide what process is due. And then that could be fought out in the courts. But due process is a very smoky concept, and it is always situational. So I think when people say it is or it isn't due process, they have to look at the circumstances. There is no hard and fast standard.
Is there a forfeiting of the due process when you illegally came in and you broke the laws while you're here before you were given supposedly due process?
Generally in this country, we've always provided some measure of due process to anybody that's inside our borders. This has been true under Republican administrations and Democrat administrations. But again, I think the question you pose goes to, well, what process is due? And I think at the very least, you can say very radically expedited removal from the country is the process that you are due. And that doesn't necessarily mean you sit in front of a magistrate or even an immigration official. It could be simply they file paperwork against you. You could object with paperwork and somebody looks at it and stamps deport on it. And that, in my opinion, would be legitimate due process.
Okay. There's a lot of things going in the right direction, but there still seems to be a moral decay in our country. It's alarming in some ways. I mean, in a lot of ways, but I mean, in some areas, it's becoming alarming. As a believer, how do you balance this? I mean, you're involved in this ugly fight, and at the same time, you're trying to stay clean. No wonder you have big dogs behind you.
For me, Perry, I'm always a glass half full guy. I've been wired that way, but I came to faith. I was saved at 51 years old. I'm 63 now, so I'm a slow learner, but I came to faith and was radically saved. And so my perspective is I know how the story ends. I know who prevails. I know that I've been saved by grace. I know that good news is available to anybody out there who wants to accept salvation. I also know that I have a duty to be in the fight. And in the end, it's not up to me who wins the fight. I don't even know what victory looks like, to be honest with you. It's really up to the Lord who wins and what victory looks like. And the most specific example I can give you, we just had, which is Easter and the resurrection. We go through the crucifixion, which I'm sure to the apostles looked like the end and the worst thing that could possibly happen. And yet it was the beginning of the greatest chapter in all of human history because the crucifixion led to the salvation. So when I look at the situation and say things look dark, I don't know what the Lord is doing. I don't know the Lord's plans. I have to be completely reliant on and obedient to whatever the Lord has in mind. And I just follow along and smile because I do know the end of the story.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. Today is the 77th birthday of Israel. It's pretty significant, don't you think?
Yeah, not only significant, but an actual miracle. And I think I hear this all the time from people, miracles were only for biblical times, and we don't see the great miracles any longer in the modern era. I don't know where folks get that in scripture, but I do hear this even from believers. And the reality is, if you look at the reconstitution of the state of Israel, the people of Israel returning to the Holy Land in the modern era after thousands of years of exile, that is an extraordinary miracle. And if you look at the history of the country of Israel since its inception, the wars that it's fought against all odds, the way they are surrounded by millions of people who hate them and would like to eradicate them, the way that they've been able to overcome all those odds in what are seemingly impossible war situations, Israel is a modern day miracle. And I look to it for inspiration and guidance constantly. And I have a special attachment. I'm a Jewish Christian. Both sides of my family are Jewish. And so for me, Israel is absolutely the Holy Land as both a Christian and a bloodline Jew.
Wow, well said. So let me ask you this quickly as we head towards the end here. Israel is, like you said, it's a miracle that it still exists today and all the things that are going on. And we seem to be supporting Israel a whole lot better than the previous administration. Do you see any daylight between America and Israel today?
I mean, I see a lot of daylight between Democrats and Israel. I mean, it seems now at this point, the majority of Democrats are anti-Israel. Certainly, the majority of Democrats in Congress are anti-Israel. They're attacking John Fetterman, a powerful Democrat senator, because he's pro-Israel. That's the main reason. So, yeah, I think we've come to a point in our country. Unfortunately, it used to be Democrats and Republicans were united in their support of Israel, but we have a schism in this country. So I worry about this. At the federal government level, I think Trump is a wholehearted Israel supporter. He's not always going to do what Israel wants. It's very important to remember that we are the United States of America. Those are our interests. We are America first. But our interests are well aligned with Israel. And so I think at the federal government level today, there's a lot of alignment. But out in the public, and certainly with the Democratic Party, there is a major schism that has developed.
Yeah. Are you surprised at the rise of anti-Semitism?
I'm not only surprised, Perry, this is the first time in my life as a Jew that I feel threatened in my own country. I mean, I know there's always been anti-Semitism out there. There will always be idiots who have one form of racial bias or another, and I've heard it in my lifetime. But it hasn't been bad. But when I go on the internet now and I see, especially on the right, what I consider sort of mainstream characters on the right spouting insane anti-Semitic nonsense, yeah, I'm surprised by that. And again, for the first time in my life, I'm genuinely worried about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. You're a blessing. Thank you. Thank you. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out the website, conventionofstates.com. Order up the booklet, Article 5 Convention, and click on that. They send them out in packages. I'll let you know. I'm getting low, but I'm not quite out yet, so I'll keep you.
Let us know for sure. We'll get them to you.
I know. Here they come, about the size of your dog.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mark. You're just an inspiration. Thanks for what you do, and stay in the fight, buddy.
Guaranteed. By the way, these are the dogs in the background. That's Winston and Doc.
Winston and Doc.
Yeah, Doc is the black and white one who matches the couch. Winston is brown and white, and they are both Great Danes.
Okay.
Winston's 120 pounds and only 7 months old, so I'm not sure what I'm getting myself into.
Oh, man. So you buy dog food by the ton?
Pretty much, yeah. We have the dump truck deliver it on the front porch.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, Mark. God bless you, pal.
God bless you, Perry. Thanks.